All right. Let's see, the camera's working again today, so that's good. All right, let's pray and we'll get started. Father, we thank you for the conclusion of another academic week. Thank you for the anticipation of those things that we'll learn and talk about that will influence us a little bit more toward Christ-likeness and effective ministry. Thank you for these students. Give them grace and strength, endurance for the home stretch. And I pray that as some of them are still defining their summer activities and priorities, you give them great wisdom and understanding in what would be the best choices to make. We commit our class to you in Jesus' name, amen. All right, get this on. All right, letter B is long-term orientation. Do you remember when we talked about the fact that the older the culture is, the greater the tendency to think in terms of the long haul, okay? And that's just because when you're making a decision, let's reduce this to the age of an individual. If you're a child, your ability to make decisions that will impact the next 5 or 10 years of your life is almost impossible. Very, very little ability. Because at that stage of your life, you're thinking about the next moment. Even to think about the rest of the day is difficult for you. But when you're an aging adult, you have a lot of reflection, a lot behind you, a lot of experience, and so your tendency is going to be to think much more in terms of the long haul when you're making decisions. So the same thing that's true on an individual level for a person growing up is true on a national level, country, a culture. And so this cluster, of which China is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, is much more long-term in its time orientation. All right. Short-term benefits are often sacrificed. For that very reason. But there's a lot of good that we can learn from this, right? Even at my age, I struggle sometimes when I see something that's on sale, a tool or a book. I think, I got to snatch this up while I can. And sometimes I fail to stop and think about, the longer consequences of that. People are less likely to spend money they don't have. Oh, okay. I see myself in this mirror. We're not only able to do that, but we are strongly encouraged to do that, right? Buy now, enjoy it now, pay later. By the way, just as a side note, I'm not against credit cards. I'm not against borrowing money in concept. I am against getting yourself in over your head. At what point you're in over your head is going to be different for everybody. Okay, but that's just a side thing. Letter C, high context. This goes without saying. Norms of communication are more prescribed here than in other places. And why is that? What drives the way that people communicate in this cluster? Yeah, Jules? Relationships? Yeah, relationships. And within those relationships, what's important? Exactly. Honor. Right. I was thinking on the way in today, I came to a four-way stop over by an elementary school near our house because 18th, as you may know, is under construction, part of it, so I have to detour. So I come to this four-way stop, and a couple of children are crossing, so the guy's out there with his little stop sign, and the kids are coming through, and then he's very friendly and smiles, when he's done. And I noticed when I came up to that stop sign, I noticed who had gotten there first. I was actually the last one to get to that four-way stop, but everybody stopped. So I was ready when this guy finished letting the children across. I was ready to let those other two cars go the other way, right? But what happened didn't surprise me. They all looked at everybody else. We live in a very polite driving, context here. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, if they're going to sit here and look, it doesn't matter whether I was last one, I'm just going to go. So I did. I went. In fact, when I went, nobody else had even started rolling their tires yet. And I got to thinking on the way here, you know, we're very respectable of people. We're living in an age when you have to be very careful about the words you use to describe people, especially if they have physical or mental or emotional, you know, challenges. I grew up in an age when we used the word handicap and we referred to people who were mentally retarded. That is totally out of bounds today. And I got to thinking, you know, why is that? You and I believe that it's important to treat people respectfully because of what? In a nutshell, what does it go back to? Why should I treat you and you with respect? Exactly. It all goes back to the image of God. The way I treat you is the way I'm treating God, ultimately. And the reason for the society we're living in and what it's becoming, the reason they emphasize being respectful of people and treating people with dignity is what? What do they trace it back to? Justin, why should I treat you respectfully if I am of the worldview that's becoming dominant in our culture now? If you're just an evolutionary product of material, you know, and chance happenings over billions of years, then who are you? What are you? So why should I treat you with respect? Or anybody? I mean, it's a big deal. You got to be very careful about how you talk to people and what kind of words you use. Why? It actually is some, yeah, Jules, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, is it because you don't want to disrespect them as a person?
That's true, but what drives that? You're right. We don't want to disrespect them as a person, but what's behind it? Yeah.
It's like the equality stuff. Like, I'm no better than you are. Like, you do what you want, and I shouldn't judge you for that.
Okay, which is kind of reflective of which cluster we studied. Yeah, the Nordic cluster. Yeah. It's based on the self-identification of the individual. I don't have a right to tell somebody else that he or she or whatever label, you know, has to be a certain way or act a certain way. And so it's autonomy that drives. So in both cases, the interesting thing is, in both cases, respectability, you know, and kindness and all that is important. On the surface, it all looks the same. But what motivates that is very, very, very different. Okay? And so in an honor-shame culture, one of the questions you have to ask is, on what basis does someone possess honor? Okay? Where does that honor come from? And that's an important question. So if you're ministering in that part of the world, one of your goals as a servant of God is to help people understand the foundation. In fact, I'll just give you another little simple kind of related illustration. If an animal rights activist, what's the four-letter acronym for that? Help me out. Huh? PETA. If a PETA person came up to me and said, do you believe that in animal rights? I would say, no, I do not. And if that person would ask, oh, so you think you can treat an animal any way you want? My answer would be, no, actually, I have a higher standard for treatment of animals than you do. You believe that animals should be treated because they're animals. They're animals in their own right. They've evolved. They have a right to exist just like we have a right to exist. Yours is an evolutionary motivation. I believe that I should treat an animal decently, okay? Not because that animal has rights, but because that animal was created by a God who is the one who deserves all honor. And so my motivation for treating an animal correctly is actually higher than yours is. Yeah?
This might be an off-topic question, but do you think that as we become increasingly like politically correctness oriented, we're also becoming more honor shame oriented? Because even in social media, that's something.
Yeah, you can be shut down if you say something that's. That's a good question, Delaney, and I'm not sure how to answer that. is there a connection between honor shame and political correctness? I would say, just in theory, no. But because political correctness right now is so heated by the words that we use for people, the descriptors and things like that, it does relate. So my answer would be political correctness as a concept, no. But political correctness in the ambiance where we are right now is definitely impacted by that. Does that make sense? That's kind of a knee-jerk response, but because so much political correctness now has to do with the way that we understand and relate to people. Yeah. Okay, well, I got a little rabbit trail, but yeah, this region is a neutral cluster. Japan is the most neutral culture in the world. I think we talked about the fact that the Germanic cluster is very neutral, but Japan is actually reputed to be the most neutral in the world. And again, part of that is because of the honor shame idea. If you respond quickly to somebody, if there's I just use the word knee jerk, you don't do knee jerk responses in a culture like that because you may dishonor a person by carelessly responding. There are significant differences among countries in the Confucian cluster. Historical conflict and prejudice are different. Again, just tell me, what are the main countries that are part of this cluster? China, Japan, and Korea, based North and South Korea. Yep, those are the basic ones. But there's quite a difference in history. I mean, you may in your historical studies remember the Japanese-Chinese wars that took place. There was a time when Japan was much more powerful than China. That's kind of changed now, at least economically, although Japan is still powerful. Difference in values in these clusters, okay? And Japan is a doing culture, but China is more of a being culture. And again, excuse the stereotyping here. But in general, China has been known as being and the more rural you get, okay, there are lots and lots of huge cities in China with millions of people, but even given that, there's still a vast region of rural lives in China. Japan is more universalist, while China is more particularist, right, in the way it does things. Some of that, I don't know to what extent this is true, but some of that may have to do with influence of the United States in Japan's recent history. Japan got very much involved in the auto industry and in the technology industry, which tends to favor the universalist idea because you're dealing with markets all over the place. Again, don't take that farther than you should. Uncertainty avoidance is much higher in Singapore and Japan than in China. Japan especially, I've never been to Singapore, I've not studied Singapore, but I can tell you that in Japan, uncertainty avoidance is very, very, very high. I had a friend that went there and he made a hotel reservation. And then he went back a little later and he wanted to change the reservation. Now, here, if you want to change your hotel reservation, assuming that there is vacancy, it's a matter of seconds and it's done, okay? It took him, a half an hour wait. He's at the desk and this person has to go talk with the manager. The manager here has to go back and consult with somebody back here. So, and you sense this high uncertainty avoidance. We've got to make sure that everything is good with everybody. And the whole idea of making change in and of itself is not something that Japanese are typically comfortable with. They like things to function the way they were intended to function, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why Japanese cars are so reliable. High uncertainty avoidance bleeds into the auto industry as well. And Japanese are I was told by one guy that works in the auto industry that when Japanese cars come into port, there are Japanese auto officials who are there to do special inspections on those cars even after they arrive in port. Inspections are done at the factory and at the assembly plant, but even when they come into port, there are authorities there who do inspections on cars coming in. High uncertainty avoidance. which I drive a Toyota, and absolutely love that car. I mean, I feel like I have to work hard to make that car break. Just it's a good car. Now that I've said that, so Singapore sometimes fits better with the South Asian cluster, and even has affinity with the Anglo cluster. The Anglo cluster affinity is because Singapore, like Thailand, is a very, very powerful tourist center. And so it's going to want to cater to and reflect to some degree the Anglo culture that feeds a lot of its tourism. All right, some do's and don'ts in this cluster. Let's see. Can you guys identify any of these? Well, what's that? Chopsticks. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the way you put them too. Yeah. What's this? Huh? Pot sticker. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you know why is it because they stick to the pot? They're kind of rubbery? I've often wondered why. We just had some a couple weeks ago at home. Yeah. You dip them into a sauce? Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, good stuff. Do pay more attention to manners and etiquette, okay? Have we seen that in other clusters? Yes. Okay. You see something else up there? Where are they? These guys? Yeah, those are good. They make these in Benson sometimes? Okay, I thought I'd... Yeah, do more to pay attention to manners and etiquette. Do eat with chopsticks, if possible. Now, if it gets to the point where you're going to starve yourself, and if you get frustrated with chopsticks, and like, let's say you're eating a roll like those, don't just stab it. That's that kind of goes along with sticking your fingers in food because you can't get it with your fork, so you just grab it with your hands and now don't go stabbing it with the end of the chopstick. Do promote harmony. Now, you say, well, I'm a Christian. Yeah, well, hey, who has more reason to promote harmony? I mean, God, think about it, the creation of the earth that Dr. Bowder's been talking about so capably was a harmonious creation. It was intended by God to be harmonious. Every element, every aspect of the creation was to blend and work, dovetail together. And so, in this part of the world, there's been a lot of conflict, a lot of war and stuff. And one of the things you can say is, that wasn't the way it was intended to be, and someday that harmony is going to return in full bloom. And you have an opportunity then to explain how the Bible explains that's going to happen. Okay? Don't completely empty your plate. What happens if you empty your plate? Yeah, yeah. That's true. I'm laughing because that's true in Latin America too. You think that by emptying your plate, you're telling them this was really good, but they look at that and say, "Oh, he wants more, she wants more." I was up in the mountains in Brazil, well, hills, and this was a place that was very rural, and the guys that usually ate, there were guys that worked the fields. And so they would fill their plates with rice like this. It'd be a mound of rice and then beans on top. And they would eat that and go back and do it again. I mean, it's just, these guys were hard workers. There wasn't an ounce of extra fat on these guys, but man, did they eat. So Sunday, I preached at the church, and we went over to, I think, one of the pastor deacon's homes for dinner. And I'm sitting at the edge of the table, and the lady that serves, okay, and what they do is they put the stuff on the table and then they just stand there. And she's standing right next to me. I'm sitting right here and she's standing like this. And I know what's coming. I said, okay. And I like the food. It wasn't that I didn't like the food, but I just don't have the appetite that those guys do who work out in the field. So I ate it, and I left a little bit. And she said, "Oh, give me more, give me more." I said, "No." I said, "Thanks." I said, "That was delicious, but I'm full." She said, "Oh, you don't like the food?" I said, no, I love it. It's very good. Then you want more? Okay, I want more. So she piles them on and she put it on there for me, And so I think, okay, Lord, help me to get this down. Not because it wasn't good, just because I'm full, And so I ate some more, and she said, "Do you want more or more?" I said, no. She, in her eyes, she's being polite by just heaving it on. And I'm trying to be polite by saying, ma'am, my stomach is only so big and I can only hold so much. I didn't say that, but and so I said I'm sorry. I said it is so good, but I just can't eat anymore. You don't like the food. I love the food. It's very good. No, you don't like it. And that's kind of the way the conversation ended. I thought, okay, well, sooner or later, what am I going to do? Eat until I throw up? That wouldn't be good. And so, but I had to understand that they want to see that plate cleaned up so they can pour more on it, and you eat that, and they pour more, and then when you're stuffed, then they bring out the dessert. I had a Bible study with a Chinese couple here in the States when we were on furlough, and they said, I don't understand you Americans. They said, you eat this delicious meal and you get comfortably full, then you bring out dessert, and then you eat it and you feel awful for the next hour. I thought, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. Even at Benson, when I eat over here, I always eat too much. Every time I go to a buffet, I eat more than I should. But then afterwards, I gotta walk over to the dessert bar over there, see what's over there. And I always grab something, and after I eat it, I always feel like, why did I just do that? but food, emptying the plate. All right. Any questions about? We're going to move the sub-Saharan cluster here. Actually, let me take a look at my schedule here. Let's see how we're cruising right along. Yeah, actually, that's okay. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Any questions or comments about the Confucian Asian cluster? Yeah, Jules?
I'm just gonna comment. I'm not sure if Mongolia is a part of that, but I read a book about it's a missionary who went to Mongolia, and actually if you eat the food, or if you get food there, you have to actually eat the whole plate, or else you're being rude.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll expect you to eat the whole thing, even if you are full. And so the missionary had to stuff his face because the lady was waiting for him.
Yeah. Where in Mongolia? Yeah. I had that happen in India. We went to India once to a place, and there was an upper class lady. They owned a brick. They made bricks, but a huge operation. And unfortunately, I was not feeling well that day. Something I'd eaten the day before, whatever. You know what it's like if somebody invites you over to a fancy meal and you're feeling nauseous. It's horrible. And when we sat down at that table, it wasn't just the amount of food, but even the utensils they put, all the dishes, they were silver, and they were, just everything was absolutely gorgeous. And I told, I was with Josh Chatla's mom that day. His dad wasn't able to go for some reason, but our group was with Joshua's mom. And I told her, I said, you're going to have to explain to this lady that I'm not feeling well. I'm not going to be able to eat. I said, I'll take care of it. But even though she told this lady and tried to explain, the lady still commented to her later, he doesn't like the food, does he? And that kind of hurt me, honestly, because I love curry. I really do love Indian food. It's delicious, man. Got a lot of curry where you're from too, right, Paul? No? Okay. Some African countries do, but there I go stereotyping again. And I felt bad because the food was absolutely awesome. And the rest of our team was able to eat it. But, I apologized. I said, please apologize to her. But it's the kind of thing where even if you apologize, you explain, there's something there that's so embedded that even that apology and explanation, even if it makes sense, it's hard for it to register. It's just interesting. And so felt bad, but certainly I should have gotten a picture of that table setting, because this white, big, huge white tablecloth with just everything. It was over the top. Yeah, good. All right, sub-Saharan. So what does the word Sahara mean? Well, it's called in a redundant way. It is called the Sahara. It's the biggest in the world. Sahara Desert. And Paul, I think I'm right. The word Sahara means desert. It's the desert, kind of like the word Jordan means river. The Jordan River is the river. And the Sahara Desert is the desert, biggest in the world. So, okay, let's take a look at this cluster. I love African animals. I love them all, but there's just something about zebras I especially like. So there it is. So why is it there? Why does it not include the rest of geographic Africa? Yeah, right. And when it comes to studying geography, remember that there's political geography, there is terrestrial geography. Terrestrially, all of this is Africa, but politically, all of this is really more part, well, I wouldn't call this Middle East, but it's all Arab. Okay, Middle East, even that, Egypt is normally identified politically as part of the Middle East because of the politics. Libya, Algeria, Morocco, even Libya has gotten involved some, but yeah, that's the reason, because of the Arab advance preceding the days of the Crusades. So, all right, but vast. Has anybody ever looked online and seen one of those pictures where you take the continent of Africa and you fit other continents within it? I don't think I have one of those here, but it's fascinating how many other nations and or continents you can actually fit within the continent of Africa. It's massive, massive. That inset there really shows you the Sahara, and I've not been to that area, so I want to be careful what I say, but my understanding is that the Sahara isn't just this great big vast expanse of sand. There are countries that live within the Sahara. In other words, it's not all completely uninhabited desert, okay? But it's big. It has to do with the amount of rainfall and all that. And somewhere in the middle of all that, yeah, there's the Central African Republic, okay, Democratic Republic of Congo. It's huge. Is that the biggest country in Africa?
I think Congo's third.
Congo's third? So, and some of it is just maps are weird because we live on a globe. So would Sudan be bigger?
I think Algeria might be bigger.
Algeria? Okay. Okay. Interesting. Angola speaks Portuguese. Mozambique speaks Portuguese. Cape Verde speaks Portuguese. I don't remember exactly. My geography, Paul, I apologize. My African geography is not what it should be.
I'm from Congo, so from all over Africa.
And for that matter, I haven't even my understanding of the Canadian provinces isn't what it should be. Yeah, got some work to do. All right, one of the greatest distinctions of the sub-Saharan cluster is the family. Now you say, well, isn't that true in every culture? And the answer is true, but it is even more obvious in some clusters. And the sub-Saharan African one would. I just got this as a stock photo. It's a wedding. And one of the things that you'll notice immediately in the sub-Saharan cluster is their love for colors. They love colors. That's true in India as well. It's true in Latin America. In fact, if you think about it, in general, the non-Western world is much more colorful than the Western world. And again, that's stereotypical, but on a broad scale, that seems to be more the case. But sub-Saharan Africans love color. African weddings are a huge family affair. Paul, the weddings that you've been to in Congo, do they reflect more of a Western style, or have you been to, very, very indigenous kind of weddings?
Indigenous.
Can you describe a little bit about what they're like?
Well, it's more like the wife's side family will bring certain things, and as a present, nobody ever wraps the present. If it's, let's say, a TV, it's not going to be wrapped. It's going to just put it, like, everybody brings a gift. The wife family starts first and the husband family next. It's like a competition, who brings the best.
Competition. And they don't wrap them because they want everybody to see what you bought. No competition if they're covered up with wrapping paper.
Missionaries are covering with their, we give envelope and cover it, and people understand that this is different culture. So, but my mom sometimes just like gives them cash. So
That's interesting because Americans sometimes don't even, they're careful not. I mean, if I were wealthy and I came to a wedding and I brought a gift of $1,000, check for $1,000 of cash, I'd probably be very careful not to display that just because it would draw undue attention to myself. But you're saying after that, they want that. That's part of the. So the wife's family and the husband's family are competing to see who brings the best gifts. Does that create at all strife between the two, or is it more just of a fun thing?
it's more of a fun thing. Like,
Okay.
even a Christian wedding, there has to be some type of competition, some type of strong drink. So,
Okay.
some family from our church who, in the wedding, they don't drink, but because of the family demanded it in the wedding, they put it there for
Okay. And the gifts are all kinds: clothing, electronics. It can be just anything.
anything. It
Yeah.
can be a brand new table, bed, it's just one of those things that's surprise for foreigners.
So they don't register on, at Target or something like that, in a place, right? Yeah. Interesting. Justin, did you have your hand up?
No.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Anything else about the wedding you want to mention?
Food, the best.
And who provides the food?
They divide. The wife family would do maybe the drinking, and the husband family would do the food. Depends on what each family wants. If the wife family loves fufu, they'll prepare fufu for the family, just for that. And if the husband family wants kwanga, they'll do it.
Okay, you got to help us. Fufu.
It's cassava. It's a root, and they also eat the plants too. So it's the roots, and they dried it, and they turn into powders, and eventually turn into fufu where they cook it.
Okay. It's not like Mantiac root, is it?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. The part of Brazil where we served is very African, because the African slave trade all started in northeast Brazil, and they do that there. They grind it up, and we call it farofa. It's like sawdust almost. And then you put it in with rice and beans and stuff, mix it in, and eat it. It's probably done differently there, but yeah. And they serve what we would call like French fries, but they're actually Mantiac root that's chopped up, and they look like French fries, but it tastes different. Yeah. How long does a wedding ceremony normally last?
Till morning.
It's in the morning?
Till morning.
Yeah.
They go from 8 p.m. until like 6 in the morning. Everybody's drunk, you can't drive, so everybody just stays in there.
Wow, till morning. Interesting. And does the couple stay there the whole time, or do they exit and everybody just stays there and keeps?
Stay there. There's no such thing as honeymoon.
There's no honeymoon?
No.
Okay, so they get married and they just move into their house and start living there. Interesting. I don't know the history of honeymoons. That would be, does anybody study the history of honeymoons? Is that just an American thing? You honeymoons in Germany? Where did that come from? I don't know. In China, they do honeymoons? Jules?
I don't know if they do honeymoons in China.
Okay. And where does the word honeymoon come from? I don't know. A lot of things to learn. Cool. Is Paul, is marriage between classes, different classes, okay?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're in upper class, you have to marry someone upper class.
Hmm.
And it depends on education. If you're a well-educated person, the family will want you to get someone who's well-educated.
Okay. So education could even trump your class. If you're middle class or lower class, but you're well-educated, you might be okay for you to marry somebody from a higher class. Interesting. Very interesting. Man, I'm sorry to pick your brain here, but I just thought that was interesting, and you'd be the best one to. Anything else about weddings you want to say?
Children's a lot to come. Stay all night.
Are arranged weddings a thing there at all?
Yes.
Yes, as in common, or?
It's common. People are, we have a deacon in our church who had arranged marriage. He didn't want to. The family wanted it. So he married her. Then before he got saved, he loved this lady and he married the other lady, so now he had 2 wives. When he got saved, we had kind of to tell him, like, you have to support both wives equally. We just had a case study in current issues class yesterday, and we talked about a situation involving bigamy, two wives. And we had a pretty good discussion. It's a complex issue. Yeah. When churches are started in that culture, many times the majority of the believers who have become part of that new church are involved in polygamy. So, the question becomes, what do you do? But we're not going to talk about that here now, but it is a thing. Good, thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. And feel free during the course of this cluster to chime in anytime you want. You're not interrupting, you're benefiting us. The bride is treated with immense respect. Okay. Does the bride at an African wedding normally show up late? And I'm assuming that's because of the idea of anticipation. She's the special one, everybody's waiting for her. Or is it just because it takes a long time to get her hair done and her nails done? Hair done, nails, almost everything.
Again, going back to Northeast Brazil, which is very African, we went to the wedding of our niece. She married a Brazilian guy. And the wedding was scheduled for 4 in the afternoon. It started about 5, which really was pretty good. Only an hour late. I was impressed. But about 8 o'clock in the morning, all the ladies show up at one person's house, and the hairdresser is there, the manicure, and they went all out. I had to look twice to make sure that was my wife. They had the way they had her hair and the makeup and everything. I almost didn't recognize my own wife. But it's just a huge deal. And so what you're seeing here would not be an exaggeration. It's all out to make them look nice. Yeah, cool. Most girls go through a rite of passage. And there are different rites of passage, and I am not well educated in all of them. I may have another point on this. Let me just double check here. Some rites of passage, and I want to be careful and respectful here in mixed company, there is a form of female circumcision that is practiced in some cultures, okay? And it's bad in every sense of the word, okay? But it is practiced, and many times because of spiritual implications and things like that. Some cultures believe that when the wife gets pregnant, the bride, after marriage gets pregnant, that the spirit of the ancestors or someone can actually be implanted within the womb and influence that child. And I don't know, Paul, if that kind of thing is true where you're from as well. Do you talk about that sort of thing? Do you want to add anything to that?
Well, it's more Germanic. It's especially in South Africa. It's where they tell the child you are chosen by your ancestors. And here in America, you don't see the demon possession, but it is true. You see it a lot of times in kids where they just fell down and they start talking in languages you don't know. And you have a friend, she was teaching that class. The only thing she can do, she can just pray. And they called Jesus a white person, God, and the ancestors are like Germanic thing.
You're talking about young children that will actually...
Yeah, because the parents are training them, saying, "This is your, grandpa chose you to do this and that."
Wow. Wow. There's so much to learn. Yeah. Because when we talk about demon possession in our culture, we typically say that a person can only be demon possessed if he or she voluntarily opens himself to the demon. But you're telling me something different. That demon possession, at least as it's understood there, can actually happen to someone, to a small child, without really any concept of what he or she is doing. Reminds me of Jesus coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and the man is there saying, "My child," and we don't know how old that child was, but he's demon possessed. He throws himself into the fire, or throws himself in the water to drown, and all that. Yeah. And you made a good point too. I don't know if you meant to say this, but I understood you to say that demon possession is a thing. Demon activity is worldwide. Satan is just as involved here as he is in sub-Saharan Africa. The difference is the way he manifests himself. Much more subtle, much more unobvious, because he studies the culture, he analyzes the culture, and the best way for him to manifest himself, or not. Yeah. All right. Let me see. Some see sex as not for pleasure. Now, that is not just a thing that you find in sub-Saharan Africa, but even in our country, in the colonial era, there were people that believed that sex was dirty, and that the only purpose of sex was to have children, and it was not. In other words, sex would be a purely functional thing. It wasn't intended to be a vital part of the marriage relationship, the joy and happiness in a marriage. And then, where are we at here? Okay, we'll stop with this one. Some have codes for women to communicate with each other. Now, Paul, I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if that happens where you're from. Are there certain code language or things that women use when they're talking to each other in your culture?
I'm a dude, so I won't know.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right. You wouldn't know if it was. And that may be more of a tribal thing in certain places, in that region. All right. Well, we're actually slightly ahead, so woohoo! I'll let you go a couple minutes early. But thank you. Have a great weekend.